think it's important for us to put together a structure that it's easier to keep track of, especially as the application grows. We have more screens, we have a lot of things going on. In a simple application, of course, you wouldn't need to do what I'm going to show you right now, but I think it's a good idea to get into the habit of doing this way that I'm going to show you, as opposed to just putting everything all over the place. Let's go ahead and create a new package inside of our main package. So new package, let's call this navigation. Okay, there it is. And we're going to create another package. We're going to call this screens. We are going to create two files. The first one is going to be navigation. The other one is going to be screens. Okay, let's right click here, and I'm going to add a Kotlin class or file. Call this movie screens. All right, so what are we going to do in movie screens? Well, here we're going to create an enum, so really a way of us to list out all of the possible screens. Again, there are other ways to do this, but this is the best way because we can always add more screens into this list, in this enum, as our application grows. So I'm going to say something like this: enum class movie screens as such. And then here I'm going to create the enum. So the first enum is going to be home screen, and the next is going to be details screen as such. But inside of this enum, I'm going to create a companion object as such. Okay. Now, inside of this companion object, I'm going to have a function called from route or route, depending how you say this. And in this case, I'm going to pass the route, and it's going to be nullable string as such. So this function here is going to be related or inherit from movie screens like that. And then I'm going to set all of that to a when expression because I want to check a few things. The first thing I'm going to check, of course, I'm going to check if route, okay, substring before, let's say substring before like this, and put / like that, because the routes in navigation, they work pretty much just like if you go to a web link, right? So it could be something like www.google.com and then / and then we go to a route such as sign in. What we're doing here, we're trying to figure out what is this route. Okay, this is the route we're talking about, right? Which is after the / right? So in this case here, instead of when, I'm going to say if home screen dot name, okay, then this is going to be home screen dot name as such. And next, we're going to check if details screen.name, getting the actual enum value, is going to be details screen.name like this. And if it's null, we're just going to say, let's just go back to home screen. Okay. Else, we are just going to say throw illegal argument exception like this, and it's going to be say route. And then we're going to pass the route that we try to access, say is not recognized. Essentially, in Kotlin, if you want to write, say, a function of or any member of the class that can be called without having to instantiate this class, right? Say, then you can just use this companion object. It's almost like the static keyword in many other languages, such as Java. So I can go straight from movies dot, get the movies dot from route without having to instantiate it. In this case, we're also going to create just one instance. All right, so that number one. Next, once we've done our movie screens, right, enum class here, what we need to do is to create the actual navigation. All right, so let's go ahead and go say new Kotlin. I'm going to just say file. That's fine. That's fine. And here I'm going to call this movie navigation. So what we are going to be doing here is we're going to create that structure that I showed you earlier. We're actually going to start creating this structure here. So we're going to start with the nav controller. All right, so what I'm going to do, let's say it's going to be a composable, as such. And I'm going to call this, say, fun movie navigation. All right, there it is. And to create our controller now, it's very simple. We can say val, call this nav controller, and I'm going to set it to the remember nav controller, like this. Now we're going to have a problem here. The reason why is because the nav controller, let's say nav controller as such, it's not added into our dependencies automatically, which means we actually have to go into Gradle, go to build that Gradle, the module movie app, and then here we need to add that dependency. Right? It doesn't come for free. It doesn't come just like that. Where do we get that dependency? Well, Google's our friend. If you go to developer.android.com, Jetpack Compose Navigation, or just type in Google navigation, compose navigation, or navigation component, you should get somewhere like here. Now notice here, this is part of Jetpack, which means that the navigation component is actually also working in Compose, which is really important because we're using Compose. So you can go start reading a little bit. The setup says here, all you need to do is to add this implementation here, right? The Android navigation compose. Now you notice that the version of this navigation compose dependency here may change by the time you watch this video. So what's important is that you just come here, you will always get the most current one. All right, so let's go back, and I'm going to change the syntax a little bit. So I'm just going to put somewhere at the bottom here, and I'm just gonna, to keep it all uniform, I'm just going to remove all of those and leave it as that. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and sync. Okay, so everything is synced. If you come back here, you can see that now you should have access to import, or at least the capability of importing the remember nav controller. So I'm going to say Alt or Option, Enter, and voila, it's now imported. So again, we just instantiated our nav controller, which is really, really important. Why? Because remember, nav controller is the central API of navigation component. This is what instructs everything to happen. Okay, so now we have to create this nav host. Remember, the nav host, as the name implies, it will host all of the graphs, these guys here. It will be able to swap out each destination, in this case, each composable, when users navigate to a new screen. So how do we do that? There is a class. Let's go ahead and close this down. Well, we can say nav host. Look at that. We have all of these nav hosts, and all of them, they are composable functions, which is very important because we are in Compose. So just pick one. Now we have to pass the nav controller. Where do we find it? Well, we just created one. Pass that, and then we have to pass the graph. But instead of the graph here, what we actually want to pass is going to be the start destination, because the graph is created once we start the destination, and we pass that along. Start destination, and pass the string. Now for the start destination, what is it that we're going to be passing here? Well, let's put this in a new line. We are going to say the following. We're going to say movies, movie screens, and we're going to go ahead and get home screen and get the name. What's happening here? Well, we could have just wrote a string that contains a home screen name, right? But this is the best way, as I said, because we have just one place where we can add all the screens, all the destination, all of the composables as the app grows. It looks like overkill, but this is the best way to do this. Okay, so we're just passing a start destination. It could be a string. You could just put home screen as a string, right? Double quotes, or like this. Do like this. All right. Okay, so we have that now, and then we're gonna put, say we have a trailing lambda. Now inside here, this is where we put the actual navigation graph builder. Okay, this is where we build what? This is where we build this, the nav graph. That's why you see is here, nav graph builder. Does that make sense? That means then this is where we put together the composables. But how do we do that? Well, the way we do this is as follows. You say composable like this, and you can see it says composable is a function that you pass route, and you can pass arguments. But what's important, you can pass the route. What route? We go to movie screens again, that home screen, that name to get the actual value, and we have another trailing there, trailing lambda, which means here we pass where this should lead us to, right? So here I'm going to pass home screen as such. Now, here's the thing. This home screen here is going to ask you to import. That's not the one we want, because we have to pass the actual composable. That's very important here. Okay? So this is the starting point. We are saying here our starting point in our nav host, our start point is going to be, in this case, in home screen, which we created, right? The route here inside of our movie screens. And we say it's going to be a composable. We pass the name of where we want to be. We want to go, the name of the composable. But now we have to actually pass the composable, the actual composable. Now, this means, let me go ahead and comment this out. This means then we have to restructure other things as well for this to work, because the way things are right now, everything is inside of main activity. It works, but it's not going to work for what we want to do. And this is what we're going to be tackling in the next video.